Welcome back. I'm the Book Guy, and today we're discussing Katabasis by Rebecca Kuang. This is a dark academia story about two rival students who travel together into hell to bring back the soul of their dead professor. It's got magic, dark humor, twisted psychology, and maybe even a little sprinkle of romantic comedy, but in hell.
Welcome to hell, motherfucker!
Now, I am going to be upfront today. This book has received some pretty mixed reviews so far, and personally, I am a huge fan of Rebecca Kuang. I've liked all of her books so far, and I even got to meet her recently, which was very inspiring to me. But even I have to admit, this is the first of her books that I overall didn't like. I think it's got a few problems, and it's very painful for me to admit that.
Traitor!
Now, let me be clear, there are still a lot of good things about this book. That's why I'm recommending it today. It's got great ideas, some really beautiful writing, it's great character arcs, and plenty of just overall spookiness in hell. But I also thought the book had a lot of flaws in its execution. Things like interrupting the action with flashbacks way too often, and repeating the same story points over and over a few times too many, and also just being a little too predictable. Now, to be clear, I have seen other reviewers say that they love this book so much and they would give it 6 stars if they could, and they think it's a masterpiece. So a lot of people love it quite intensely because there are things to love about it. So my goal today is not to push my opinion on you, because who cares about that? My goal today is to be objective and to try to show you an accurate depiction of this book with all the strengths and all the weaknesses spoiler-free, so that ultimately you can decide for yourself if it's something you want to try. Let's begin. Alice Law has accidentally killed her teacher. Professor Grimes was trying to use a magical circle that Alice drew, but she made a mistake in that drawing, and he was brutally, gruesomely killed instead. And this happened right before he was due to graduate her.
Well,
now Alice has decided to draw another chalk circle and transport herself into hell in order to retrieve Professor Grimes' soul and have him finally write that letter of recommendation she so desperately needs. Yet Grimes' other student, Peter Murdoch, insists on coming with her. So Peter and Alice have been bitter rivals for their professor's approval. Now they must work together to bring him back. But hell is more unpredictable and dangerous than either of them could have imagined. And that's if they don't stab each other in the back first. So this book is like a spiritual successor to Babel. In many ways, you can consider these two books an unofficial dark academia duology, though they are, of course, in two different worlds. Now, what makes them dark academia? Well, it's different for both books. See, Babel takes a look at academia's role in the wider systemic issues like racism, imperialism, and historic revision, whereas Katabasis takes a much more individualized approach, looking at the psychological effects of extreme performance pressure and very unhealthy relationships. Part of the darkness in Katabasis comes from the bitter rivalry between Alice and Peter. Their relationship has changed several times over the years. At times it's friendly or bitter or just pure hatred. And they are rivals, yet they are also like siblings too. It's a very weird, layered relationship.
Bart, just get out of here.
Perhaps more complex is their relationship with Professor Grimes. So this man is their teacher in magic, and he has so much power over every area of their lives. He's so intelligent and widely respected in the community, and his students would do anything for his approval. And then we see what happens in academia when one person has that much influence over another.
I own you!
Of course, the obvious darkness is hell itself. So Katabasis' hell is inspired by many classic poems and pieces of literature, most notably Dante's Inferno. The idea is that all those poets and scholars in the past went to hell and then wrote about their experiences, and that's the blueprint that our characters are following along, like a map.
Then maybe we should travel by map.
Of course, in this book, hell is not the Christian hell of eternal fire and brimstone. Instead, it's more like the land of the dead. for lost souls who haven't yet made peace with the sins of their life and still have something else left to work out. This is honestly a bit like The Good Place, where there's lots of jokes about people going to hell for mildly annoying things.
Did you ever take off your shoes and socks on a commercial airline?
So, like, people who buy all these books but then never read them end up in the library of pride, surrounded by other people who are bragging about books they've never read and claiming knowledge they don't have. Like, that's just a lot of fun. Now, this hell does have 8 levels that you can see on this map, and this is a pretty cool world-building feature where we reimagine every level to fit the dark, spooky sin that it correlates to. I won't spoil exactly what each level is because that is most of the fun of the story for me. However, this is my first criticism. I wish these levels were explored a whole lot more. In many ways, I would argue that just 3 of them were really fleshed out, but the others were quite shallow and some were almost skipped over entirely, and it felt a little bit like a broken promise or a missed opportunity. Honestly, at the end of this book, I kind of wanted to go and write fan fiction just to fill in the gaps. But we'll talk about why in just a second. Also, this book is actually set in the modern era. I believe it's the 1980s, and the character makes a reference to the Beatles, and that kind of, gives you the time placement. It's an interesting setting because the era, in many ways, doesn't actually matter that much. It's all about the realm of hell and a university, which are 2 quite timeless settings. And finally, there is magic, although it's only briefly in this story, really. It's based around chalk circles, but it requires paradoxes. That's why there's the Penrose stairs on the front cover of the book, because magic is all about trapping things inside a paradox. These spells are very difficult to break. Overall, there's not a huge amount of, chalk circles and paradoxes in the books, but the system itself is pretty unique. Now, as I see it, there are 3 primary plot lines in this book. The first is the journey to hell. Second is exploring Alice's complex relationship with her teacher, Professor Grimes. And third is her relationship with her rival, Peter, her co-journeyman. Now, the trip into hell is called Katabasis. Yes, it's a literal Greek word that means journey into the underworld. And yeah, it is pronounced Katabasis. I always thought it was Katabasis. Yeah. Anyway, so all of the spooky levels of hell and the dangers and the monsters within, that's exactly what I signed up for. That's the good fantasy stuff. It was epic fantasy world building crossed with lots of intertextual references between works of classic literature. And again, I'm really skimping on the details here because I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a lot of references to old texts, and it really was fun to see this sandbox come together and start to be played with. Second, we have a lot of flashbacks to Alice's time in university studying under Professor Grimes. We see why she's so determined to get his soul back. Yet through this plotline, we also see a few unusual things about this teacher-student relationship. Grimes can really push his students hard, maybe too hard. Now, at first, Alice has nothing but adoration for him, yet her perspective on that begins to unravel.
I thought you were cool.
And the third plotline is Peter. Now, Peter sometimes appears in the flashbacks at university, but then also in the present with Alice in hell. When I started this book, I fully expected this was going to obviously be a straightforward romance. The enemies to lovers trope. But this did not fit that neat little box at all. In fact, there were quite a few surprises in this plotline. These 2 have become pathologically mistrustful of each other. And suddenly now they have to trust each other to survive. There's a legitimate risk of betrayal.
Do you trust me?
No.
Now, much of this so far probably sounds pretty good, and it is good. So why have many people, including myself, had so many issues with this book? Well, let's address that. This book has so many flashbacks. Literally more flashbacks than any story I've ever seen. It's flashbacks all the way down. The book starts with the neat structure of 1 chapter in hell, 1 chapter in university. I'm like, sure, that makes sense. But then it starts skipping back and forth constantly, even changing several times within 1 chapter. And by the end of the book, there were literally scenes that changed setting mid-paragraph. I kid you not. There was literally a scene of Alice walking down a staircase in hell, and she's like, oh, that reminds me of a staircase in university. And suddenly, we've changed scene, and we're back in a flashback now.
They must really like stairs.
This became really frustrating because the book is about going to hell. And now I haven't counted up precise numbers here, but my genuine impression of this book is that about 50% of it is flashbacks to university. That's a big number.
Welcome to my personal hell.
It's also very disorientating because it flashbacks to scenes in very random order. It is sporadic. So it's not like here we have a past storyline starting from point A and moving forward chronologically, and then a present storyline moving chronologically. No, it's just flashbacks all broken up into pieces. The other big issue with these flashbacks is that they seem to cover the same ground multiple times. It felt like we had 4 or 5 scenes of Alice and Peter being rivals at university, when I felt like one scene could have done it. Maybe 2. So it felt like we were cutting back constantly to show us things that we already knew and had understood. Now, to be clear, I was fully expecting this to be building up to some sort of revelation. I mean, they're in hell, maybe their life is flashing before their eyes, or maybe there's some magical reason why the story is constantly switching places. But no, there is no in-world justification, it's just the writing style. I even wondered if it was meant to be a theme or a narrative style where the character questions their sanity. My best guess is it's meant to show the character's mindset. But honestly, I can't really tell if that's what was intended. So while I really enjoyed what the plotlines actually were, of exploring hell and all the twisted psychology in university, I think the execution of these plotlines was just not well handled. The main thing letting down this book is the structure just being all over the place. It could have been a lot stronger if we had far fewer flashbacks, or maybe they just ran chronologically, for example. There's a few ways it could have been done better.
I need order.
But this is also frustrating because, like I said before, there were segments of hell and levels of hell that were skimmed over, and I feel like we missed the cool fantasy stuff because we were showing so many slow meandering flashbacks. I wholeheartedly think Rebecca Kuang is a great character author. So our 3 major characters of Alice, Peter, and Grimes were very layered and complex, but most of all, flawed and realistic. And I liked how each of their characters were further revealed as the plot went deeper, sort of tying plot and character development together.
That's the good stuff.
So Alice is so ambitious for success and validation. She talks a big talk about all of her accomplishments, yet she's desperately insecure and unsure of herself. So this main character has a serious lack of self-awareness, and it's very well done. I mean, we saw Rebecca Kuang do this in Yellowface, write a protagonist who's unaware of their own personal biases. And it's very well done in Alice too. She has no idea just how much of her actions and her beliefs are influenced by other people. And Peter, well, he is brilliant to the point of arrogant. He's good and he knows it, but he's also quite socially awkward and tends to be very rude, but then also be horrified that he was rude. Yes, he is a little adorkable, but the truth is we don't really know if Peter is sincere or if he's hidden his own sinister intentions about this whole journey. Why did he volunteer so quickly to help Alice in her quest into hell? Peter is a mystery and very much a wild card.
You're trying to go to hell.
Peter, you can't just...
I'm coming with you.
And Professor Grimes, well, he holds this weird place in the story, and structurally his role was interesting because he's the reason for the journey into hell, and he's also a looming presence in all of the flashback chapters. So you could say that he is a bit of a ghost in both areas haunting the story, right? That was pretty well done. As a person, he is often extremely critical and has impossibly high standards, but when he gives praise, oh, it's life-changing.
Those are words of great power.
And yet, our impression of Grimes is very much Alice's impression of Grimes, and she's not the most objective person, and we start to have our own suspicions about exactly who this guy is. So as you can see, all 3 of these characters are quite well developed. My only complaint was I found their character arcs to be very predictable. We're meant to feel some uncertainty about whether these 3 people will be good or evil by the end of the book, essentially. Yet within the opening chapters, I had my suspicions about where these character arcs were going. For all 3 characters, I was right every time with no real surprise. Now, predictability isn't necessarily a sign of bad writing. I think sometimes a predictable ending can feel satisfying because it's like a long foretold conclusion finally coming true. But I think this story really needed more tension and uncertainty in these character journeys. I think the book tried to put some character tension there, but I didn't really believe it. Although speaking of characters, this review would be incomplete if I didn't mention that this book has a cat in it. That's why I'm wearing this shirt. The cat's name is Archimedes. He's a university cat, but he just shows up in hell because cats do whatever they want. He's pretty cool. I think most of the people who love this book intensely really love its themes. And fair enough, the themes are very well done. It's a deep book, and it handles its themes with grace and wisdom. It's certainly some of the most enjoyable stuff for me too. One of the major themes is, when does a tough relationship become an abusive relationship? How do you tell? Where's the line? And this book offers a very nuanced and mature depiction of a student-teacher relationship that is suffering from this uncertainty. Because often stories give us, the tough teacher like Coach Carter who really cares about his students. But then you have the outright monsters like Trunchbull from Matilda. But it's kind of easy to tell with, tropes like that they're a bit more on the extreme. Whereas Katabasis shows a relationship that's very much on the spectrum in between that. So the question is, where is the line? When does tough love become too tough? Although before someone yells at me, I'm aware of what's revealed by the end of the book, but this is a non-spoiler review, okay? Geez, chill. Another major theme is, why do victims put up with that? Now, this was very well done. I mean, we see this all the time when we see a domestic violence situation, and we say, well, why doesn't she just leave? Well, Katabasis shows the depth of self-delusion and the excuses that victims come up with to justify their situation.
He didn't mean it.
I think Rebecca Kuang actually said it best herself. When I heard her speak at an in-person event recently, she talked about the movie Whiplash. And I'm paraphrasing her words here, okay, just to be clear. But she said that people sometimes wonder, why would a student put up with that type of abuse? And often it's because they think, well, of all the people the teacher could abuse, they've chosen me. And it's almost like the abuse is confirmation that they are worth the teacher's attention. Yeah, so it's exactly this type of dark psychology that the book uses all the time. It's fascinating and very thought-provoking. A third theme might be a little more obvious. Maybe the real academia was the friends we made along the way. I know, it sounds cheesy, but cheesy is timeless, right? It's very well done. So these are characters who have become obsessed with success and accomplishments, and they're literally risking their lives going to hell for it. But the story suggests that maybe there is more to our lives than just our contributions. The joy of life is loved ones, friends, a walk by the lake, or a beautiful spring morning. The story reminds us to live in the now. And I have no criticisms for the theming of Katabasis. I mean, I think this area is flawless. Honestly, Rebecca Kuang is known for having very obvious themes. She's not exactly subtle about it. But I personally, and many of you will disagree with this, I think she's obvious with her themes without being preachy or telling you what to do. That's my opinion anyway, but feel free to disagree. There is a very small cast of characters in this book, so there's not a huge amount of diversity, but there's a major focus on women in academia. So Alice is shown to have to work so hard to earn people's respect, yet she's a woman who disdains feminism. And yet when things become unfair, she starts asking to other women for help, and suddenly they're like, wow, look who suddenly cares so much about feminism, and they mock her for it. It's an interesting depiction of only caring about a problem when it affects you personally. This is the main area of representation in the story, although it does tackle mental health quite a bit as well. As for the content warning, this is a pretty dark book. Again, pretty standard for Rebecca Kuang. I mean, Grimes gets magically exploded at the opening with a ton of gore. So there is a low to moderate amount of violence all the way through the story. There's also quite a bit of swearing. There is one occurrence of an on-screen sexual assault, and we see someone dealing with the consequences of that, both mentally and in their life around them, how they are ignored when they try to report it, or even mocked or blamed for the event. So trigger warning for that. Now, is the ending worth it? That is the golden question, isn't it? Okay, look, on one hand, yes, I found the ending to be quite satisfying, but it was still very predictable, at least for me. It did pretty much exactly what I thought it was going to do all along, and I would have liked a few more surprises along the way. You might find predictable endings offer you a sense of comfort. Maybe that's exactly what you're looking for, in which case, go ahead, enjoy. So that's all I really have to say about Katabasis. I hope that answers your questions about whether or not you might want to give it a try. And ultimately, remember to not pay too much attention to influences. Like I'm just some guy. Remember to form your own opinions and make your own choices, okay? So be proud of yourself. Good luck and happy reading. If you want more very, very thorough book reviews like this one, make sure you subscribe to see more. If you want to support the channel, please check out my own books, The Immortal Investigations, an urban fantasy series. I have an online shop and a Patreon. All of these things will help me keep doing what I do. I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye.